What is up, everybody? In this video, I just wanted to talk about... I remember one video I did wasted Jojo characters, which is basically me just talking about underutilized characters. But in this video, I wanted to talk about people who were slept on. Characters who were... And this is only the good guys. I might do a bad guy one soon if enough people like it and view it. But this is only for the good guys. These are not underutilized or wasted. Like, Avdol didn't do much. Now I know you're gonna say, oh, he sacrificed himself, he did quite a bit. Sure, but I literally have seen remember Avdol fighting like twice or three times. Once against Polnareff, a mini fight against Jotaro getting him out of his cell, and that thing he did with Joseph against Mariah. The other times he was either sacrificing himself or getting one-shotted, or just being a dude in the back just being like, oh! But Avdol to me was underutilized, especially for a character with his... First of all, the dude has so much things he can do with his powers, and his stand is amazing, but I feel like he was a bit underutilized. When I say wasted, it means like it's underutilized, but when I say slept on, these characters were utilized, but I feel like some people overlook him. I'm not gonna say a lot of people, because some of these characters I'm gonna mention, people do appreciate. It's kind of like half and half with a lot of these characters. But in part 1, a kind of slept on character in part 1 was to be honest, there's a lot of characters that were not super slept on in part 1 because it's not a really long part. It's a little bit short, and there's not too many characters. But if I had to say any character that I thought was kind of slept on, and this doesn't have to mean, oh, they did a lot in a fight, or oh, they did this. Like, sure, it can be like, I'm not saying this is the character, but maybe like Caesar in part 2. Maybe, you know, his role as that was a bit slept on. It doesn't have to be because they do a lot in fights necessarily, just a lot in general, in progressing the plot and showing many things about the show differently. Maybe can be a lot of different things. Avdol was not talkative. He's just a lot he didn't really do. He was just kind of in the back, just being like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. Not saying I hate Avdol. I love Avdol as a character. I just wish they utilized him a little bit more. And it doesn't have to be only in fights either. But back to what I was saying about part 1, a character that I think was underappreciated, to me at least, was George Joestar. Now I know what you're thinking, George? What the hell is this dude talking about? George Joestar, he did basically nothing, but I beg to differ. Yes, George Joestar wasn't a fighter, and he wasn't one of the most popular characters in the show, and not too many people remember him. He's not even a JoJo, he's just George. He's just a George Joestar. Technically, he's the first Joestar that we know of. But George Joestar, I think, as someone who, for his role, I think fits his role pretty good. The way he talks about Dio and the way he contrasts Dio and Jonathan, and the role he plays with how he treats Dio and how he treats Jonathan and how he influenced Jonathan and Dio and how they turned out, I think was a pretty good role. Then how he's getting sick and Dio kills him, and Jonathan finds out, yo, this guy's poisoning George Joestar, who treated him like a son. Kind of just shows how bad Dio is. Now you can say, oh, he's kind of just a stepping block for Dio. That's fine. That doesn't mean he's a bad character just because that's like that. You can say that about like a main character, like that side character is kind of there just to boost the main character. But because George Joestar doesn't feel like someone who's just a nobody and does play a role, and if he wasn't there, the show would be vastly different. And I don't think you can just replace George Joestar with any random like dad who's just peak bland and doesn't treat these two like their sons or whatever. I don't think you could have replaced him that easily. You would have had to written someone exactly like him, just maybe different, but at that point that's still George Joestar. So I do think George Joestar was kind of slept on compared to the other characters in part 1. And yeah, it's a bit of a stretch, but that's just because part 1 doesn't have too many characters as it is. So after part 1, Phantom Blood, is part 2's Battle Tendency. A slept-on character in battle tendency, to me at least, was Stroheim. Now, a lot of people can say, well, I think Caesar was slept on. I see so many people bring up Caesar. I don't really see too many people bring up Stroheim. I see a couple of people, and that could just be me and how how much interaction I get with a lot of JoJo fans. But usually when I talk about Stroheim, they're like, oh, I forgot about him. Yeah, he was cool. He was clutch. But I think this guy Stroheim was like an absolute W. Now, it's kind of wild to say, considering this man was literally a Nazi. This man was literally a Nazi major. So that's already just like, what the hell? Like, this is ridiculous. Now, Stroheim does do a lot in fights, especially. Somehow this dude's not even like a hormone user, and he's over here doing a lot as it is. So definitely Stroheim for part 2, at least for me. Part 3, Stardust Crusaders, a slept-on character. I could say Kakyoin. I really could say Kakyoin. And that's because I've made so many videos with Kakyoin, and I've done so much. Because I think he is the most slept-on character, or one of them at least. But if I said Kakyoin, I think that'd be kind of a cop-out, because I've talked so much about that man. He's one of my favorite characters in all of JoJo. It'd be kind of like a broken record. I'm just repeating the same character every time I talk about part 3, and underutilization or wasted, or he's cool, my favorite. I'm not going to say Kakyoin, because even though he's a contender, I don't think he is. I wouldn't say he is. I'm going to say Joseph Joestar for part 3. Now, you could say, what? Joseph doesn't do that much in fights. He's only had a couple of fights that were actually clean, where he helps. Again, it doesn't have to be fights. It really doesn't have to be fights. Every time I bring up part 3, Joseph Joestar, like, yeah, he was cool in part 3, but I like part 2, Joseph, better. And for that I say, yeah, part 2 is cool, but don't sleep on my boy Joseph in part 3, because 1, he was pimping. He was pimping, okay? Josuke is a thing, and that dude was pretty old back then. He was pimping. Yes, he did cheat on his wife. Definitely a bruh thing. And sometimes he does weird stuff, but in terms of, oh, this character is slept on, I feel like Joseph does a lot for the team. Joseph provides everything. He has the connection to the Speedwagon Foundation at first. Without all these resources that Joseph is providing because of his connection to the Speedwagon Foundation, they wouldn't be getting planes, getting away from the government, doing all this stuff. All of it. The Speedwagon Foundation is only connected to Joseph. I guess Jotaro, but Jotaro got kind of most of the stuff from Joseph. So that alone is like, yeah, maybe he might not be like crazy in fights, but also as a leader, the dude is definitely a good leader. Sometimes he screws up, but like with the camels or whatever, sure. But that he makes up for it because of his connection to the Speedwagon Foundation, and he's also extremely smart and a tactical genius. Yes, you could say I'm glazing and deriding, but that's basically the whole point of this video, so that's literally it. Part 3 Joseph, definitely. I'm not going to be cop-out and say Kakyoin, so definitely part 3 Joseph. Part 4, there is definitely a couple of picks for part 4. You could say the alien, you can say Jotaro, maybe Koichi, Okuyasu, even Rohan. And my original pick was going to be Rohan or Raimi, but I'm going to go with someone who I think a lot of people overlook because he's not as flashy, and yes, he has something to do, but every time I bring up a kid doing something in JoJo, a lot of people refer to Smokey. He's like, Smokey, yeah, he became mayor, or Emporio from part 6. But when I think of a kid from JoJo that was actually out here doing stuff, Hayato comes to mind. Hayato all day, every day. This was not no regular child. I barely even have to explain why I think he slept on. This kid was doing so much, literally, and he's like 11. He's like 11 years old, basically going up against Yoshikage Kira. This kid was actually insane. He was literally insane. He was smart enough to figure out and get Josuke and all the other Morio protectors to help him out take down Yoshikage Kira. He lived against him. That's ridiculous. I think Hayato definitely deserves more credit than what he is given. And after part 4 is part 5's Golden Wind. Golden Wind has a couple of characters that come to mind. I'm not going to say Mista, I'm not going to say Bucciarati, and Fugo I think was underutilized. And Trish was okay, but for the most part I think she didn't do too much. She was just kind of there as the protector. Now and I don't think she's wasted because of that. I think she fills her role good, and how she changes from being protected to one of the people who's fighting alongside them is a W. But the person I'm going to probably go with who slept on, to me, is Narancia. Now, a lot of people can say, well, Narancia gets a lot of credit for what he does. Every time I hear someone talk about Golden Wind, I never hear anyone even mention Narancia and his Aerosmith stand and how much he does. And he even died from that too. He literally died, but he was still out there fighting, and his fights were really cool. And the amount of use he gets from his Aerosmith and scoping out places and scoping out areas is extremely useful. Now, I could say Abakio, but I feel like everybody appreciates Bakio and everyone talks about Abakio. I guess maybe Narancia's design is not as appealing as Abakio's to most people, and a lot of people mention Mista or Bucciarati, but not too much about Narancia. And I think he definitely deserves more credit than what he's given. I'm not saying he doesn't get any, credit, or like he's literally like, bruh, everyone hates on him. I just think he deserves a bit more credit because of how slept on he is. Part 6. A character I will say is slept on in part 6, to me at least. It's not Jolene, and it's definitely Hermes. Now, I know what you're going to say. I already hear the comments going crazy about how I put a main Joe bro in as a damn slept on character. Every time I mention Joe bros, literally every time. And I don't know if it's because most of the people I talk to don't really mess with Stone Ocean that much. Every time I talk to someone, I rarely hear Hermes being talked about. Rarely. And Hermes is literally one of my favorite Joe bros of all time. Up there with Kakyoin, up there with Okuyasu, and even Gyro. She is top 3 for me. For one, her design is clean, and every time I mention her, everyone says, oh, they pull out like the card of like, yeah, she was kind of injured for a lot of it. I think she was injured for a minute, but not super long, and I don't think she doesn't do much in fights. And I love the concept of her stand as well. I think it could be used so creatively and pretty usefully as well. I'm not glazing Hermes like she's peak Joe bro, or I don't even think she's better than Gyro. But I still think Hermes is heavily slept on. Heavily. Especially in just Joe bros in general. Every time I talk about Stone Ocean, it's always Jolene or Foo Fighters. Maybe Jotaro just being talked about how he kind of like got messed up. And especially when it comes to the kids of JoJo, Emporio's always coming to mind. Everyone likes Weather Report. I don't see too many people talking about Anasui, but definitely never hear too much about Hermes. And to me, I feel like she slept on, and I think she does quite a bit more than what people give her credit for. And after part 6 is part 7. Part 7 doesn't really have too many good guys necessarily. A lot of these people are either in the middle or just bad, and I feel like there are definitely some stands and some characters, bad guy characters, or even just like kind of just conflict characters, not necessarily antagonists, but they're more just like, I'm here to get my bag, and I'm just here to try. Those kind of characters in part 7 at least. Like Blackmore, I feel like is definitely kind of a bruh, because I think he could have been a lot more cooler. Same thing with Mountain Tim. But in terms of good guys, I'm not going to say Mountain Tim because I think he was more underutilized. But slept on, I'm going to go, out of everybody, I know it's going to be a weird pick, a very weird pick, but I'm going to say Lucy Steele. Now, yes, Lucy Steele was violated. She was just literally violated. She's went through so much, and she doesn't necessarily have any crazy things. Well, I haven't read JoJolion, and I don't know if Lucy is, around in JoJolion, but in at least Steel Ball Run, I think she's definitely slept on. She doesn't do too much necessarily, and I think her efforts against Funny Valentine were pretty clean. And I'm pretty sure she's around in part 8, I think, but I'm not sure. I think she's super older, and I think she has stuff to do with the foundation, the Speedwagon Foundation. I don't know if she does a lot in that. Let me know in the comments if she does, but I think she definitely was very important, at least, to showing us a side of Funny Valentine that we haven't saw. And I guess, yeah, she's just a stepping stool, but kind of, because she did make a sort of an effort, and I liked what she did. And it's kind of sad what happens to her, but she's alright. She's alright. Kind of. Can you really be alright after letting Funny Valentine, after what that man did to her? That's kind of diabolical. This man is just a demon. Just a demon. Jeez, like Griffith over here. Jeez. But that's gonna be it for this video. Let me know who you guys think is not underutilized in part 8, but slept on. Not someone wasted, someone who does quite a bit but doesn't get as much credit for it. Just for part 8. In part 9, we barely got too much of that going, so that's alright. You don't gotta say nothing about part 9 if you don't want to, but part 8, definitely let me know in the comments below if you guys read it. But that's gonna be for this video, y'all. I could do a bad guy one. I'm planning on doing one soon for the Wasted, because there's definitely a lot of kind of underutilized bad guys to me in JoJo that I really liked and took to. But that's gonna be it for this video, y'all. See you guys in the next one. Peace.
Now bless all these things, but I